Hello and welcome to another AIC Productions video. Hopefully I'm not cutting my head off in this video. But I wanted to do an updated video on my Yecoo or DIY board. The website I bought this through is Yecoo, but it's basically a rebranded DIY AT board. It was cheaper through Yecoo than buying it directly through DIY boards. A couple people mentioned that on the subreddit when I posted. I was aware of it, but it says Yecoo on there, so it's a Yecoo. And then my Spadger board. I'm just going to do a quick comparison of the two because that's what I have experience with between the two. Some pros and cons of both styles, and give my opinion. So I have been using my Yecoo board since I bought it as part of my commute to and from work. So I've been riding this about 6.5, 7 miles every single day. It's about 1.5 miles, not quite 2 miles from my house to the bus station, and then I take a bus into work. It's a little over 1 mile from the where I get dropped off to my work, then another same distance from work back to the bus stop, and then ride the bus home, hit the park and ride that I then ride home, and then I sometimes take it out on my lunch break. I try not to do that because that really cuts my time short on this board as far as distance goes. And there was one day where I did have to call my wife. I was about a little over 1 mile from the house, and it was really hot that day, and I asked her to come pick me up. But some of the big differences, obviously, between these two boards is the size. The Yecoo, or the DIY board, I'm going to call it a Yecoo. It's obviously longer. And I actually don't like that. I wish it was the same deck as this board, as the Spadger or Meepo clone is what it really is. I wish it was the same length. I find it to be a little bit on the too long side of things. Just in my use of the board, I got used to this size and I prefer this size. I find it to be a little bit more comfortable to ride than the Yecoo. The Spadger, especially with the Meepo battery that I put in there, has a much longer range. It gets at least about another mile, 1.5 miles further with more aggressive riding than the Yecoo. And it's much faster than the Yecoo. This gets over 25 miles per hour, right at 25 miles an hour. This one maxes around 21-ish, 21, 22. And the Yecoo is much slower to accelerate than the Meepo clone Spadger. A lot of that has to do with the belt system, I believe, and just the gearing on the belt system and the bigger tires. This did come with the smaller wheels on there. I honestly haven't installed those because I have no desire to run them. This board, I purposely got it because of these bigger, more capable wheels and tires. These are great around my neighborhood because I live in a neighborhood with very smooth streets, and so riding around is very nice. It's fun, it's fast. But if I get in anything that's at all rougher roads, sidewalks, this about beats me up riding because it just hits every single little bump. I hit a rock and I'll go flying. These wheels are better than even smaller wheels, but they're still hard polyurethane wheels, and they just don't take much to get them unsettled and to ride poorly. But they are long wearing. In fact, I would say that there's very little actual wear on the front tires and just a little bit on the rear tires, and I have a lot of miles. I easily have 1,000 miles on this skateboard. Where this board, I don't have nearly the same mileage, but I don't feel like these tires are going to last nearly as long as these would, especially the rear tires. I'm going to flip it over here. The rear tires show a lot more wear than the front tires, and I believe that's because obviously they do the driving and the braking. I'm a pretty heavy dude. I weigh about 260, and so they're doing a lot of the work that the front tires just are not doing. You also kind of steer with the rear tires a bit, at least I do in my style of riding, so they take a lot more wear I did take them off to see if I could swap them. I don't know how. A replacement set of wheels and tires is pretty expensive. It's like 150 or not quite 200 bucks for just a new set of wheels and tires. You can get a new set of just the tires for $90 from Yecoo, but I'm not quite sure how to install those. So if somebody knows how to do that, like I said, I did take them off and I loosened these screws here, but I didn't see if there was a way to actually separate the halves of the hub to replace the tire. So something I'm going to have to look into sooner than I was expecting. But as far as using this board as a daily commuter, it's been great. Last week we had a ton of rain. I did not ride it in the rain because it was very aggressive rain. But the day after, the streets were still quite damp, a lot of puddles, things like that. Obviously I took my time to not splash up too much water on the board itself, but it rode through it just fine. The sidewalk cracks or uneven roads, things that would definitely throw me off of this board just soaks it right up and makes it like nothing. So if you're commuting on a board, I would recommend this board over this one any day of the week, or at least this style of board with these kind of tires. As far as the belt drive itself goes, man, it is loud. The volume difference between these hub motors and the hub motors and the belt driven motors, night and day. These are 10 times, 15 times louder than the hub motors are on my Spadger. This board also weighs a ton. I know it has a much bigger battery, but just with the motors and the wheels and everything, this weighs, I believe, about 6 or 8 pounds heavier than this board does. So it's kind of a beast to carry in with me. The deck is pretty flexible. I like the deck on it, other than just the length of it. And what else? The electronics are pretty solid. I hate the remote for it though. I'll show you a close-up of the remote, but I had to jury rig the remote because it actually broke on me. I'll show you that here in a little bit. But other than the remote, I really like this board. If you can use a different type of remote, I don't know if you can or cannot. I'm going to have to do a little bit of research, but I don't like the remote style. I prefer the remote style of this board much more. Like I said, this board is a little bit slower than this board as far as the top speed, and it does accelerate a little bit more slowly. But because I'm commuting and not racing or anything like that, it's really not that big a deal for me. Just the reliability of being able to get to and from work and not have to worry about getting so beat up and things like that on this board outweigh the speed advantage of this board. I get about 7 to 8 miles range on this board, where, like I said, I get more with this, closer to that 9 mile range on this board after the battery upgrade. And so that makes a big difference if you need more range. Like I said, I haven't put the smaller wheels on this. That would probably make a difference because these wheels are much heavier and take a lot more power to get moving than the smaller wheels would. This also has a much bigger battery, so I have a feeling with the bigger battery it would get much better range with these smaller wheels. But like I said, no point in that. I got it specifically because of these. I'm going to have to get some spare parts, some additional belts. I did order a remote and additional charger so I can charge it at work. And I bought those directly from Yecoo because, again, the price was better ordering through Yecoo than it was ordering through DIY board. So when you're looking for this, I would definitely look at pricing on that because, like I said, the price was a little bit better through Yecoo than it was through DIY. But yeah, if you're looking to buy one of these AT style boards, I definitely recommend this one. I mean, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I've been using it for over a month now, daily, literally daily. Every single day I go to work that weather permits, you know, when it was torrential downpours I just drove in. But every other day I've been riding it. I wear a big hat, you know, big beanie hat and gloves and things like that, and been riding it. So let's go ahead and stop here and I'll show you the remote in so I can show you what I had to do to the remote, which I highly recommend doing when you get this board. First thing you should do is the model on the remote that I'm going to show you so that it lasts longer. So, alright, let's stop here and we'll be right back. Alright, so first things first, I got a new desk pad or big mouse pad. Tell me what you think versus the old design. But here are the two remotes. The one on the left is the Spadger or Meepo clone remote. The one on the right is the one for the Yecoo or DIY e-board. A couple of things as far as the overall design. This one I prefer significantly more over this one. Several big reasons. One, it's a little bit smaller, so it fits in my pocket a little bit better. The control up here I find to be more tactile. It just feels better in using it. I like the little ring to put my finger through. It makes it easier to hold comfortably in my hand and not worry about dropping it. I can also hold it loosely in my hand and, you know, I'm not going to lose it. The reverse button on there is harder to push, and you'll be like, well, why would you want harder to push? Because on this one, the reverse button's right here. Well, when I grab this remote, it's right under my finger, and I have pushed that several times by accident, and the board just dies when I do that, and it takes me a second to realize, oh, I accidentally pushed the reverse button. And it doesn't even take like a full push. I just basically have to put pressure on it, and it's enough to engage reverse. So I much prefer an actually harder reverse button to push. Now the DIY has a better switch on the back here for high, medium, and low than this, but typically that's not a big deal for me, because you usually, or at least for me, I just leave it in high all the time, and if I need to go slower, I just don't push up on the throttle as much. Let's go ahead and open up this remote and I'll show you what I had to do to the internals of it, because like I said, it broke pretty quickly. And just 3 simple screws. There we go. So here's the switch for your acceleration. If you look in there, you can see, if my camera will focus. There we go. I had to fill that with epoxy. So right here is where that switch tip goes in, this right here. And for me, it broke on both sides, both forward and back. And so I went to push forward on the remote, you'll tilt it forward, and nothing happened because it broke. And so I pushed it back together, threw a little super glue in there, in the seams where it broke, and then filled either side with an epoxy. And so if you buy this, the first thing I would recommend doing is taking the remote apart and filling both sides with epoxy to start off with, because it will break on you. It will. Here, this is just not enough plastic. You know, when I'm going for rides, I'm riding for, you know, 2, 3, 4 miles at a time, and so my thumb's just holding this for extended periods of time, and that's just a lot of pressure to put on that thin of a plastic. Go ahead and open up the other one. You can see what it looks like on the inside and how it's different, because like I said, I have 1,000 miles on this board. And have had exactly 0 issues with this remote. My last board had, or my first board had, the same style of remote. Come on. You see it's almost exactly the same internals, but you can see here there's more plastic on either side of that hole there, and it's angled so it can take more pressure. And so this is a better design than, where'd it go? Look around my camera here. than this is, even though they are a nearly identical switch that they connect to. See? Because this was completely void on either side before I filled it with epoxy, where this one actually has plastic holding it up and is actually structured to take the pressure of a switch. And with this, you kind of roll it forward, so you end up pushing more pressure down on this, where this you actually put the pressure at a completely different angle because of this little knob here. So I know that's a lot of talking about a switch, but since this is what you interact with the board, this is a very critical piece of plastic, even though it's tiny and probably costs about a penny to make. So anyways, if you have any questions about either board, I am going to be selling my Spadger because I just don't need two boards. But the DIYE board and the Yecoo board is going to be my long-term board. I'm definitely going to get the best use out of it that I can, and using it as part of my daily commute here to and from work. Anyways, if you have any questions, feel free to comment down below. I'll do my best to answer those, and I hope you have an amazing day.